Hello. Welcome to the official book launch of Shelly Edwards Jorgensen's memoir, Beautiful Ashes. I'm Rebecca Shurtleff and am Shelly's co-author and your host tonight. Are you ready for fabulous prizes? Meeting Shelly and Glenn and Julie is going to be great. And don't forget the best part, your questions. To win one of our fabulous prizes tonight that we're giving away, you need to submit a question for Shelly, her husband, Glenn, or you can do all of them. If your question is picked, you will have your choice from a signed copy of the book, customize his or her aprons, or if you live in the United States, you can also choose a dozen amazing chocolate chip cookies. You can submit your questions in the chat. Just be sure to include your first name and your hometown and country. Before we start this evening's events, I want to express my gratitude to each person who's shown up for us tonight and in this whole journey. To our advanced readers, thank you. Our writing group friends, our family members, Shelly's domestic violence and trauma support group members, you all have put a hand on our backs and cheered us on, and we want to thank you. It has been cynically stated that people write memoirs, they think their lives are special, but they aren't. And I totally agree. But without cynicism, I would add, because their life is not special, it's accessible to everyone. Our life experiences are unique in their circumstances and details, but the themes and emotions, our devastation and our joys, these belong to the entire human race. That's why we write and read memoir, because every story is an extension of our own personal experience, even if those details change. We are our own story's heroes. The oldest archetype, the hero's journey, is a perfect framework for memoir. We all experience trauma, adversity, success, failure, and hopefully love. Memoir is a genre that lives and breathes. Tonight, we celebrate one woman's survival. Shelly's rise from the ashes of her own trauma is a victory for all of us because it proves that even in the worst of our human experiences, we can find hope and everything can be made beautiful. I believe there's no better message for the world that we've inherited. Let's welcome Shelly.
Hi.
Hi. Shelly, can you share for those who haven't had a chance to read your memoir what Beautiful Ashes is all about?
Sure. Beautiful Ashes is a story about finding hope and healing after overcoming some of life's biggest trials. For starters, I grew up in a home with an abusive father. My dad was an alcoholic with a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde personality and would become verbally and physically abusive, but most of that abuse was being directed at my mother. As I got older, his drinking got worse, and so did his explosions. On October 14th, 1985, when I was a 15-year-old sophomore and my sister was a 17-year-old senior, our home burned down and our mother died. It wasn't until 4 months later that my dad was arrested for setting fire to our house and murdering my mother. And his trial wasn't until the spring of my senior year, but suffice it to say that I've been on my own since that day. My mother died. Lots of support and help from others, but I fundamentally have been on my own. On that day, I lost my mother, my home, all worldly possessions, and my family was destroyed. This story made the headlines and shocked the community. I say this because from the outside, we look like the Cleavers on Leave It to Beaver. If, I'm dating myself here, but anyway, with the exception of a handful of people, mostly direct family members, nobody had a clue that the facade of upscale suburban living hid the hell that we actually lived in. In addition to growing up in domestic violence, I was also a victim of sexual assault, actually more than once. And I'm not going to spoil the book for everyone that hasn't read it, but these are just a few of the trials that I've had to overcome. And as a matter of fact, there were several traumas that I didn't even mention in the book because there was just too much already.
Shelly, you've lived what others probably view as an extreme version of life. None of us would wish a single one of those things on anyone. And yet you say that you've been blessed by facing so many adverse experiences. And I have to ask, how is that perspective possible? Looking back now, how can you share something that would help the average person who hasn't been through such intense and struggles? What could you say that would help them in their daily life?
Well, I learned that no matter what happens to you in your life, no matter how bad it gets or how bad you think something is, it's okay. No, today it might not be okay per our standards, but as long as you're doing what you should be doing and doing your best, everything will be okay. It will be exactly as it should be. That isn't to say that it will be exactly as you want it to be. I learned that I needed to trust in God's plan for me. That was my first step. And after I was able to do that, I realized that I didn't know what was best for me, but He did. And when we put our trust in Him and let go and know that in the end we'll be okay, then I learned to trust and I learned to stop asking the question why. Why did this happen? Getting stuck on trying to answer the question why, which is a normal question that we all ask, I learned was a death blow to my healing, and I had to get past it. And when I finally understood that the answer was always because I needed to learn something, I was able to get past it. And so instead of asking why, I learned to ask what and how. What am I supposed to be learning? And how do I use that knowledge to help myself and others? And let me caution you on that what and how answers. These answers don't usually come quickly. So you really need to be patient with yourself and give time for you to learn exactly what those answers are to the questions of what and how. And and this led me to the understanding that trials and tests are actually good for us if we choose to allow them to be good for us. The way that I see it is this: life is meant for us to be tried and tested. It is designed for our growth. It isn't in God's plan for it to be easy street. If it was, then we wouldn't have a chance to grow. We would never be able to become the people that we need to be without opportunities for growth. And so the trials often hurt and are really hard to deal with, but they are the exercise that our spirits and character need to strengthen us and help us become who we need to be. I like to think of it like a weightlifter or an athlete because I used to be an athlete and a weightlifter. But uh, if athletes don't go to the gym and do the exercise and lift the weights, then they won't be in the physical shape they need to be to perform well. The same goes with us and our character. If we don't do the heavy lifting, so to speak, then we'll be weak and unable to become strong. The worst thing that we can do is compare our problems to somebody else. It's just a defeating exercise. I learned that too. And the truth is you might think that so and so has it easier than you do. But I also realize that they don't. God pushes all of us to our limits. He loves us all the same and wants us all to have the same chance at growth. The differences are just what our trials are. Our trials are tailor made to help each of us reach our potential. Because we are all different, we have different strengths and weaknesses. Our trials have to be different. They are by no means a punishment. They're opportunities from growth for growth. And it's up to us whether or not they become stepping stones or stumbling blocks. We decide if we're going to face life challenges and grow from them or let them defeat us. And then I learned, but this might sound really hard to believe, but I can honestly sit here today and say that I wouldn't change anything about my life. Yes, I wish that many things could have been different and that my mother was here, but I really know that I wouldn't be the person that I am today without these experiences. What I do know is that I have strength that I never knew was possible. I've learned empathy to a level that most people never will. I've learned that if I truly trust Christ and put everything in his hands, he will carry me. And one last thing that I've always held on to is the knowledge that God is perfectly just and merciful. So the way I see it is this: I've always looked at the scales of justice, and if one side piles up with adversity, then at some point, all the sorrow, pain, suffering I've experienced in my life is going to have to be offset with joy and happiness. And it just isn't up to me to decide when that happens. I just learned and I know that it will. And so the ironic thing is that my mother came to me 3 different times. And when I was in the throes of hell, I mean, those that have read the book already know that. And the only message that she gave me was that I was loved and everything would be okay. Mind you, this was before my second rape, before my dad's arrest, and before my testimony at trial. Not to mention everything else in my life that was yet to fall apart. She was trying to teach me exactly what I needed to know to survive. I held on to her words until I learned for myself that she was right. Everything will be okay.
Shelly, I love that it all comes back to your mom's message. As a mom myself, during this process of co authoring the book with you, I've often wondered if I had been in your mom's shoes. What would I have said if I had one line to come back and say to you? And my conclusion is that she nailed it. Knowing that you're loved and that everything is going to be okay in the end, it's not trite and it's not cliche. It's everything. I love that. Tonight, as you may have heard, we are partnering with our favorite organization, Finding Our Voices. In 2016, Patricia McLean's secret of 29 years became worldwide headlines with the arrest of her celebrity husband for domestic violence. Everyone knew then that Patricia was a survivor. Dozens of women in her small Maine community reached out to her, confessing that they too had been terrorized by an intimate partner. They hadn't known about her, she hadn't known about them, and in consequence, they had all felt alone, even in that small, tight knit community. Realizing how pervasive domestic violence is and how still no one talks about it awakened Patricia and prompted her to start a nonprofit she called Finding Our Voices. Tonight, we join our voices with theirs and offer you a way to voice your own support by purchasing a Beautiful Ashes t shirt or hoodie. It has on it this quote from Shelly and her mother: "Everything is going to be okay." We know that there are times in life when nothing feels okay. And the only thing that makes it possible to keep putting one foot in front of the other is hope that things will change for the better. So we invite everyone to join us tonight in supporting domestic violence survivors with this affirmation. All proceeds go directly to Finding Our Voices, and you can check them out at findingourvoices.net. You can order your own Beautiful Ashes t-shirt at the website on the screen now, and you can also find links on Shelly's Beautiful Ashes Facebook page. Now, before we go on, I want to remind you to send in questions for Glenn and Julie and Shelly. I see a lot of really good questions coming in. We will randomly select questions, and if yours is picked, you will earn a prize. Again, we have signed copies of Shelly's book, custom aprons, and a dozen amazing chocolate chip cookies if you happen to live in the US to choose from. So simply use the chat box like you have been doing to submit your questions along with your first name and origin as identifiers. If your question is picked, though, I want to let you know you need to go ahead and email Shelly at beautifulashesmemoir@gmail.com and let her know your full name and your address and which prize you choose. Then she can get that to you. Thank you in advance for all these questions. They're going to make tonight a really unique experience. Now, before I introduce Glenn and Julie, I do have one last question for Shelly. We had to delete a lot of scenes, Shelly, to shorten this book to 400 pages and sharpen the focus of your message. So I wanted to ask you, Shelly, can you describe just one scene that you felt sad leaving out? And
Well, I there before I jump into the deleted scene, I wanted to point out that I'm wearing a purple Beautiful Ashes t-shirt for two reasons tonight. First, because it's my mom's favorite color and I'm trying to honor her. And second, it's the ribbon color for domestic violence awareness. So those are the reasons why I'm wearing it. But on to the deleted scene. And there's many, like Becky mentioned. The one main story that was deleted was about a dating experience that I had to end. At 15, I was fending for myself and longing for a place to belong again. I wanted nothing more to have a family to call my own. Fortunately, God blessed me with incredible friends, and I have been adopted by my friends' families. And however, the dream of getting married in my 20s and having children of my own wasn't in the cards. After years of zero dating and feeling unlovable, I was introduced to a very nice guy. I was actually 38 at that point. We started talking on the phone since he lived about 2 hours away from me. I discovered that he was a widower and had two teenage girls. I found it amazing that his oldest was about the same age when she lost her mother that I was when I lost my mother. After months of a long distance relationship, we planned an in-person date. It just happened to land on my mother's birthday, and we met at a restaurant near his home. And the plan was that after lunch, he would introduce me to his girls. It was Memorial Day weekend, and for those that know Michiganders, it's the official opening of summer. Unlike you Californians that get to enjoy it all year, uh, we cherish the summer in Michigan, and many people in Michigan have cottages up north. And up north is a nondescript way of saying somewhere north of Metro Detroit. So while I was no different, I was going up north after this date, and his house was along my normal route to get to the cottage. So after lunch, we went back to his house, and he introduced me to his girls. We had a great afternoon playing games and getting to know each other. The girls went to bed early, and we stayed up talking. And at the end of the night, he kissed me. And I was ecstatic because it had been over a decade since I had last been kissed. It was well after midnight, and I had an hour drive north on mostly empty freeways. I was so happy about how the night had gone, I didn't notice my speed. And for those that know, I do have a lead foot, but this time I was going over 90 miles an hour, and the next thing I know, there are flashing lights behind me. I had not been pulled over in years. My heart sank. I think everybody knows that feeling. And however, for the first time in my life, I was pulled over and didn't get a ticket. I don't even want to mention how many speeding tickets I've gotten in my life, but this was the first time I didn't get one. And the police officer just told me to slow down and be safe and enjoy my weekend. And I left there kind of thinking that it was a sign from my mom that, maybe things are good here. And so for the next 2 months, we talked on the phone every day. And on weekends, Chris and his girls would spend the weekend at the cottage with me and my adopted Taurus family. On paper, everything was perfect. I was opening myself up for this man and his two amazing daughters. Then one night I was prompted to pray about whether or not I should continue to date him. I was getting really close to his girls, and I worried that if in the long run things were not meant to be, that it would be harder on them. So I wanted an answer about what I should do before I kept going down the road I was on. The answer I received that night was powerful and horrible for me. For those that have read the book, you know that I've had several experiences with ministering angels. Well, this night was no different, and I was told that I needed to end my relationship immediately because he was not the right person for me. I had had a perfect match, and Chris was not the one. I was so upset, and I couldn't believe that I was being asked to walk away from another man, not only that looked perfect for me on paper, but I was beginning to love and care about. Plus the girls. Who else would be the a better potential stepmom to teenagers that lost their mother than me? So the next morning, I asked Chris to go down and sit on the boat with me so we could have some privacy and talk. I told him that I had prayed about our future and that I needed to break up with him. I tried explaining that it wasn't anything he did or didn't do, just that it wasn't right for me and that I thought it would be best for his girls if they didn't get any more attached to me. He was upset. I was upset. He gathered himself. We walked back to the house. He immediately packed his stuff and they left. I was heartbroken again, but I trusted God's plan for me and I moved forward. It took me another 2 years of not dating before I met Glenn. After meeting Glenn, I knew that I'd found my perfect match. And now I'm so grateful that I listened to God's counsel and followed his plan for me. I'm happier than I ever dreamed possible.
I love that story. I think everybody can relate to an experience like that where something you really want seems within reach. And yet, for you to have the faith to walk away, to accept that small voice telling you, nope, not time yet. That's amazing and excruciating. And that shows real trust in God and was why I was sad to delete that scene. But it gives us a chance to meet Glenn. So, Glenn, come and join us. I'm so glad our readers get to meet you and I get to put you on the hot seat. Are you ready?
Ready or not? Hello, everyone.
Awesome. So, Glenn, relationships are just hard. And when it comes to second marriage or just a new one in midlife, it has to be that much more scary. We've experienced more and we have more to lose when we're further along our path in life. And I have two questions for you. First, when did you know that Shelly was the one for you? And then, secondly, how has her journey writing this memoir affected your life? And maybe you can give us uh, best moment, most difficult scenario.
Sure, sure. I would have to say, excuse me, I have to say that I knew early on when we started dating, probably within a couple of weeks, although I didn't tell her that. We just made a great connection since our offices at work were very close to each other, although we had never met. And we just had a great connection going out to lunch and enjoying each other's company. Um, in many relationships, you often have to wait and you have doubts if this is the right person. And so, I've known in my life that I've had doubts many times, but since I met Shelly, I've never had that doubt ever once that I needed to keep moving on or do something else. And even to this day, I've had the same feeling. I think in putting this book together, there's some good moments and there's some really tough moments. I think the most difficult um, part of this journey over the last 9 years or so was seeing the pain she had to go through because, reliving traumatic events in your life and not only relive them, but have to read them over and over and over and add more detail was very difficult to watch, and we spent many nights where in tears over just the tragedy that she had to survive. But on the flip side of that, I think the best moments I've seen in this whole process was in going through that journey, it's allowed her to heal. And she's used that to reach out to others who may not be as far along in their journey of trauma. And I've watched this healing take place over these years as she's been able to come full circle on this and help others with their lives.
I love that. You guys are a great team, and I know there's no perfect marriages, but you guys are perfect for each other, and I'm so glad that Shelly got her happily ever after with you, Glenn.
Thank you.
So next up is Julie. Hi, Julie.
Hey there.
Julie, you and Shelly have something that many women would just kill for, but is impossible for. Oh, I
We don't
shouldn't
need
say
another
that.
book on killing.
Right. No more domestic violence
None.
memoirs here. But it's impossible for a lot of reasons, and that is living with a friend. I wanted to ask you, Julie, what has that proximity been like for you during the years? What has it meant, and what has the journey of the last decade been like for you?
Well, when I first met Shelly, we like clicked instantly. And within about 2 weeks, I had semi moved into her apartment, and we've been like best friends ever since. And Shelly and I functioned as a unit from our mid 20s through our 30s and still today. And when others were getting married and having kids and continuing on in their lives in that matter, we had each other to lean on. My reality has been living with my best friend, and most people pick up their spouse during those years, but we picked up our friendship and sisterhood and just lived life. We lived life to the fullest. We had two Labradors. This is our first set, Puddles and Bella, and they were our kids per se, and we loved them so very much. And we would go camping almost every weekend. And then we got smart and bought a pop-up camper. And we were both fresh at backing up trailers at that point in time. And we still love to laugh about going camping one time and setting up in the dark and me sitting there yelling as she's backing up the trailer, "No, this way," as if I was helping the situation at all. Anyway, we still crack up over that. Through her, I've learned so many life's lessons. Empathy can be one. She can relate to almost anything, and I can draw on her experiences to help myself and others. And I found myself being more understanding of people and their situations and true concern and love for others. You never know what someone else is going through in life. And be the understanding voice or the shoulder to lean on, or in some cases, cut some slack on a stranger because you never know what's affecting them. And compassion. She lives to help others, and I try to emulate that light. Yes, Shelley was going through some really dark times and counseling along her path, but I was happy to help her along her way and be there for her. The healing process and story writing has been pretty brutal for us. As Glenn said too, she's had to relive every single moment of her life again in detail. And it's almost a helpless feeling because, like, I couldn't help her with her trauma. I could only be there for her. And honestly, I felt a lot of guilt for having a trauma free life. But I came to the conclusion that we all have different journeys in life to go through. However, she did it all out of love by writing this book to help others. And if even one person is helped, it was worth it. And I'm just so proud of her. And I just love her so much. And I'm just so very happy that she's trying to make a difference in the world. And she will make a difference. And I'm just excited to see where this road leads from here.
Julie, you have been a blessing to her, and it's a gift what you guys have.
I think so too.
Yeah. All right. So now we're going to put all three of you on the hot seat. And we're going to take some questions from our audience. And we're going to ask Jody, our wizard behind the screens, to flip up our first one. And here it is. This is from Julie. Shelly, what moment or experiences allowed you to open up about your story and experiences later in life? Love that. There you go, Shelly.
Well, I think it was an evolutionary process. First, I had to go through my process of healing. I had to get myself to a place where I wasn't triggered anymore. I wasn't that it wasn't hard for me. It's never really been. Anybody who knows me knows it's not hard for me to talk. If anything, I talk too much. But uh, getting into the real feelings and emotions and everything behind it was something that took me time, and and then began to realize that, I have had this life experience and I've learned so much that I didn't want people that had similar experiences as me not to know the lessons that I learned, not to know that it was possible to survive these things, and not just survive but learn how to thrive. And so then I began feeling like I really needed to do this. Plus, I I was encouraged by my mother, and that's a whole different story. But yeah, so I did it out of love of others, and just a desire to want to help as many people as I possibly can.
And you do. Thank you. Okay. Now, remember, if your question is picked, go ahead and send your email to beautifulashesmemoir@gmail so you can get your prize. Okay, Amy, you are next. This is also for you, Shelly. Lucky girl. Reading about Glenn's support in your healing seemed to be the first time you really found support in a relationship. Did you feel his unconditional love right away? Oh, she says those parts of the book made her cry.
Well, I yes. First of all, Glenn is more amazing than even the book says, but he he's just he's very compassionate and kind and loving and giving and supportive to like the nth degree. And and I think that's why we connected so well right at the beginning, because he he's just so kind and gentle and understanding, and he does have an unconditional love for me. And it took me, again, because of my past, there was a lot of trust issues that I had that I worked out mostly. But this was the first time that I really allowed myself to fully trust and believe in his unconditional love. And I think that you guys can even see there's moments in the book, early on, where I'm still questioning whether or not I can truly believe that he was never going to leave me. He never was going to abandon me. And that's a hard trauma to overcome, especially if you've had that in your past. And so I know now, and I've known for a long time that he never was. And fundamentally, I always knew that he wouldn't leave me for any reason. But there's just that little nagging doubt, and when you're, again, in the throes of hell, you think, how can anybody want to endure this with me? But he's amazing.
You guys are both amazing. All right, Esther. What is one thing I can do for my friend who is dealing with the PTSD of trauma? Shelly says this a lot, so take it away, Shelly.
Okay, so first of all, I spent 15 years. Literally, I started going to therapy when I was 19. I and I went on and off, mostly on with probably 3 or 4 different counselors between the time I was 15 to the time I was in my mid 30s. And most of the talk therapy helped me some. And it was good, but it didn't get me what I needed. By the time I was in my mid 30s, I literally was praying to die every day. I was still having reoccurring nightmares. I was still struggling with lots of things, but I was functioning. I'm good at not being seen as sick or afflicted. That's just my personality. And so even though I was functioning, I owned my own home. I had a great career. I just finished my master's degree. I still was miserable. So I found a counselor that did holistic, different approaches than just talk therapy. And in my mid 30s, I just turned 52 yesterday. So um in my mid 30s, what was that, 15, 17 years ago, I did EMDR, NET, which is neuro emotional technique, uh craniosacral therapy, neurofeedback, and a few other things that really helped me. Uh, they they were actually very life changing for me, especially NET. That worked the best for me. But I think you have to find the modality. It's just like a diet, right? Not every diet works the same. Not every course of therapy works the same. So for somebody who's struggling with PTSD, they need to find a therapist that does these other techniques that are beyond talk therapy. And then the other thing that I did was that I learned that I needed to change my attitude. I was so focused on what I didn't have in my life at that point that I couldn't see the forest for the trees. And so at the same time that I was doing this intensive therapy work, I also worked on shifting my mindset. I was trying to look at the glass half full instead of half empty. I was trying to look at the things that I had instead of focusing on the things that I thought I was missing. And they were big things. I mean, I wanted a husband and a family. I mean, that's all I wanted from the time I was 15. Here it is 20 years later, and I still hadn't obtained that goal. And so it was hard. But and also during that same time, I worked on my faith. And that's really when I learned how to trust. And so it's a combination of a lot of things, but Esther, the first thing is to get the right kind of therapy. And if you want to PM me or ask me, I can give you some links. Just maybe do it tomorrow or something. Just reach out to me and we can have a further discussion on that.
And that is a classic Shelly response. Just reach out to me and we can talk about it. You're gold. Okay, so our next question is from Debbie. What has been the most important and helpful step in your healing process? So you just talked a lot about that process. So if you were to say, okay, here's the one thing that I couldn't live without in this process, or that undermined or underpinned everything, what would that be?
Faith. Learning how to apply the atonement. And I know that everyone doesn't have uh, a huge relationship with God, but I do, and it was the key to me. One of the books that I read was what was it called? I'll Believing Christ. And so one of the things that was said in that book is lots of people believe in Christ, like believe that he exists, believe that he was real. And I know that there's a lot of people that don't, but there's a lot of people that do, that they believe of him. But the real key is that what I found is that you have to believe him, believe that his words are real, that the power of the atonement, a lot of people think it's just about being forgiven for our sins, but the reality is he suffered for your infirmities, he suffered for your sorrow, he suffered for your pain. And And if you allow yourself to learn how to apply the atonement, again, it becomes a trust issue. It becomes you have to be able to release the the burden of carrying that yourself. And I know it's a different process for everyone. It's also not a light switch. It's a slow process. It's something that you evolve with over time, and you have to. There's a scripture. I'm terrible with scriptural quotes, but there's a scripture about uh, yoking yourself with Christ, and that your burdens will be made lighter if you do that. And I found that that was really real, and that was, on top of the therapy, on top of changing my mindset, actually executing that application changed things. And all of these things are really easy to say to do, but to actually learn how to do them is a whole nother ball game. And I just need to tell people, you have to be patient. You have to keep working at it. It's a slow process. And lately I've been giving these analogies where you know we're here to learn and grow. Well, if you're a parent, how do you teach your child patience? You make them wait. How do you teach somebody long suffering? You have to suffer long. How do you teach somebody endurance? You have to endure something. So all of these things, and that's what I meant about learning. I've learned that I had to have these experiences so I could learn those characteristics. And so by doing that, um, it's not something that happens overnight, but it can happen if you want it to, and it takes work.
Great answer. Carolyn, hello. I've heard about you a lot. So it says, this is Carolyn and Carol Zidell from Northville. Shelly, when was the first time you were able to breathe, and what allowed you to feel the hope? I love those questions.
First time I was able to breathe, probably after I finished. There's never a finish to your healing journey, but after I got through the bulk of my healing journey, which wasn't until my late 30s, I was still between. I would say I was in survivor mode probably for 20 years, because I just was trying to keep it together all that time, because I didn't have the tools that I needed to move forward. And that's another reason why I'm doing this. And it's kind of a twofold question, because it took me a long time to finally be able to breathe. But what allowed me to feel hope was I did have those experiences with my mother at the very beginning, and I held on to those experiences where she told me everything was going to be okay. And at first I'm like, how the hell do you think this is okay? What's going on? Just became a disaster after disaster after disaster. But that always stayed in the back of my mind. And so as Becky mentioned, I'm kind of tenacious, and I keep driving at something. I don't ever give up on anything. And so, breathing and actually coming to myself with peace and joy. I mean, I literally, after 2.5 years of intensive therapy and this intensive healing journey, I walked on my therapist's office one day. I felt like it was springtime, and everything was brighter. The sun was shining. I noticed things. It was like I was just first alive again. And that's when I felt like, I can do this, and I've done this. And so I always had a piece of hope because of the message that my mother gave me, and I believed her and I trust her. But but actually getting to the point where I felt that that was going to be a reality that I would actually find in life, it didn't take me, and it took me until my late 30s.
I think that's important for people to understand. Healing is a process, it's a journey, and you exemplify that so well. All right, so Jennifer will be our last question. So she says, "Hi, Shelly from California. How are you now after writing this book?"
Thanks, Jennifer. And I won't post any of our high school pictures with our big hair because we don't want to expose ourselves to that. But anyway, the after writing the book, I'm just so relieved that it's done. It's a very laborious process. Becky and I have been on this journey for 9 years. Becky Becky had a baby. She moved to Thailand for 3 years, came back. It's been a long process. We had to go to all sorts of writing conferences to figure out what the heck we were doing. This marketing and publishing process is completely insane. So I haven't been able to breathe for months. And so I feel super relieved. I'm looking forward now to be able to, uh, my whole goal was to help as many people as I possibly can. I was basically, I'm basically doing this to help others. And of course, I want the book to be successful, but I don't care if I make any money on the book. I just want to help as many people as I possibly can because I don't want anybody to suffer as long as I did unnecessarily. If I had had a mentor or somebody like me that could have helped me sooner and understood so many things, that's why I think in so many ways I'm in a unique position because I've had I guess a cornucopia of trauma. And so I've had to learn to overcome and endure a lot of different things. And like Julie said, I rarely find somebody that I can't relate to. And so I'm an open book. I I have people messaging me and talking to me from all over the world now. My social media, I've been on trauma groups and lots of things for the last 3.5 years, and I'm going to continue to do that because my main mission now is to help as many people as possible. And so I'm just excited that the task of delivering the book, writing the book, publishing the book, and doing all that minutia that kind of occupied a lot of time, um, which kind of drew me away from helping as many people over the last several months just to get the book out. So I'm really happy that I'm in a position now that I'll be able to move forward and help.
Perfect. Well, we want to thank everyone for your questions. Remember, if your question was picked, to send that email to ashesmemoir@gmail.com. And we'll have that information up after we end tonight for a few minutes. I hope you enjoyed getting to know Shelly and Glenn and Julie a little bit more on a personal level. Working with Shelly for the last 10 years has been incredible. Actually, sometimes people ask us how we ever began this project together, and that story in and of itself is a little miraculous. So I was going to share that with you really quickly before we close. I met Shelly at her wedding. I'd known this nice guy named Glenn for a few years. He actually taught my oldest daughter's Bible study class, like children's Bible study, when he was going through his first divorce, his only divorce. And he was a super nice guy. And so when I got his wedding invitation a few years later, I was excited for him. So one evening in June, we went to this wedding reception of his, and I greeted Glenn and I shook Shelly's hand and introduced myself. And then I went off and danced with my husband, ate great food and cake, and just had a great time. And I went home, and there was no fanfare, no angelic heralds letting me know that this bride of his would change my life. But a few months later, I saw Glenn again at church, and Shelly wasn't with him. And I thought back and thought, I actually haven't seen her for a few weeks. And so I stopped Glenn in the hallway afterwards and I said, Glenn, how's your new wife? How are things going? And he told me, actually, Shelly's having some medical issues. And I said, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Is it okay if I stop? I knew nothing more of Shelly than her name. So I stopped by and we began getting to know each other. And if you've ever wondered, was she actually really that sick? The answer is yes, absolutely. So over the next couple years, I witnessed her in and out of hospitals. She tried to die on us a few times. If you read the book, you'll read more about that. And she ended up bedridden and very sick. So in 2013, she'd been going through this for a couple years, and she and Glenn came to me and said, "Hey, can you help Shelly? She's going to write her memoir, and we need an editor." And I said, "Sure." Mind you, I'd never um, written anything really since college, so it had been a long time. And when Shelly brought 3 pages of bullet points to me, just after trauma, I thought two things. I thought, holy crap. And then I thought, she doesn't need an editor. She needs a ghostwriter. And so she and I started on this journey. And in in all honesty, it was a journey that I had wanted to take for a long time, ever since college, but I hadn't had the courage to do it on my own. And Shelly's appearance in my life pulled me down this path that I hadn't had the confidence to take on my own. So for several years, after college, I just thought, oh God, just please give me a story. If I could just get like a story, then maybe I could do this idea I had of being an author. And he didn't give me a story plot. He gave me a survivor who is just oozing like enthusiasm and tenacity. And, she's just like a bulldog. She gets her teeth in, she's not letting go. So she got her teeth into me. And we started going through this writing process. And to be honest, it's changed my life. Shelly appeared right when I needed her. And God, he's good. Whenever he reaches out and moves something in life, it's not, he never just moves one thing. There are multiple um good purposes going on every time he moves in people's lives. But so often his touch is so light that it is only looking back that we can distinguish his fingerprints all over the circumstances in our life. Um, and I've learned through this process how every person in my life embodies God's intentions. Whether or not I see it is just indicative of my own blindness. But we cannot appreciate which small action or what person or what choice we make will lead us to the center of our next hinge point. You know, a moment where doors and opportunities open to unimaginable places, and they turn on these really small hinges. And Shelly's been at the center of one of these really big hinge points in my life, and I'm so grateful for that. So tonight, as the co-author of Beautiful Ashes, I wanted to leave this thought with you. I want to encourage you to look over your shoulder for God's fingerprints. And when you see them, trust that his hands are still working in your life right now. And keep a hold of that hope that those things that you want most, those things that you feel like you need most, they're available at your but don't require them to come how you expect. Large doors turn on incredibly small hinges, and you are the hero of your own memoir. So expect some occasional failures, but also accept help from unexpected sources. And like Shelly says, there's always a happy ending. Your story just isn't over yet.
Well, thank you, Becky, for hosting this event, and thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I've felt I've had a great time tonight, and I appreciate your support and all of your love. I'm feeling it, just so you all know that. And my final wish is that my message reaches the bruised and heavy hearts of my fellow survivors. You are loved, and everything will be okay. Even ashes can be made beautiful.